You ready?
Yes.
I am clearly not ready. I mean, I am now, but I totally forgot we were doing this today. So that's fun. Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing lightworkers get together every week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can live as your true self and follow your true north. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby.
That's a neat cup. I don't think I've seen that cup.
No, this is a fancy Christmas mug.
Fancy.
Fancy.
Was it a gift?
To myself.
Oh, sometimes those are the best kinds.
Yeah, see it has a little Santa right there, love, a little reindeer.
It's very
my
festive.
Favorite color. It
Yep,
is.
yep.
Yeah. It is. Here we are. 1 week away from Christmas.
How do you feel about that?
It's been interesting. I feel like I always set myself up for great expectations of what I think the month of December is going to look like, and then it ends up just being a bunch of work.
That sounds a lot like your November as well.
Yeah. Well, November is true, but I plan on doing that kind of work, and that's actually a lot more fun. This kind of work is like in my head, I have these dreams of I'm going to just do a lot of reading and a lot of Christmas movies and baking and spending time playing games with Patrick. And I have a puzzle table upstairs and a puzzle table downstairs and just puzzling. And it just ends up being grocery shopping and an open enrollment insurance at the machine shop and like just
but that stuff's all
cleaning and prepping
though, right?
and it is.
Like, none of that blindsides you.
No, never. And it happens every year. You would think that, I would know how long this stuff takes, but I inevitably still get to the point where it's like, I have not sat down yet, and we're a week away from Christmas.
Is it that December brings more end-of-year work onto your plate, or is it just that your regular plate feels like more work because you want to fill your time with all this other December-y goodness?
Well,
or some
here's
combination of both.
Thing. I have this idea that if people are going to spend time in my presence, it has to be perfect. Totally unrealistic. So I have company coming this weekend, and the house has to look completely festive. All the dog hair has to be completely cleaned and picked up, right?
Well, that is legit.
The menu has to be, the whole weekend has to look effortless and beautiful, and that requires a lot of work. That's my own shit. But, so it is extra work that I probably don't really have to do at the end of the day. I mean, it's company, it's family, nobody really cares.
Right.
But it's just sort of this idea of the holidays that I have in my head.
Where did that come? Who put that idea there? Was that your mom?
Well, my mom started it just from the fact that if anybody comes over, the house has to be perfectly clean and put up. So I resented that for a while, and then I realized I actually really like order. I like things having their place. I like things to be clean. And having people over is sort of a good excuse to make sure that happens. But that's probably, where it started. My mom. Mm-hmm.
My mom, my best friend growing up, we were like family friends. Like everybody in that family was best friends with everybody else. And that family, parents, kids, all of it. Mm-hmm. And the first time we went over to their house, my mom tells the story better than I do, but there was they had 4 kids at the time. There was laundry on the couch that hadn't been folded. There was stuff. There were toys. There was just stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And the mother of this family, who was a lieutenant in the Army, lost points for the bed sheets not being folded the right way, that's where she came from. But we go over there, and she makes no excuses. She makes no apologies. She doesn't even verbally acknowledge or disclaim that the house is not perfect. It just is what it is. And it was if you're going to be in our house, this is the house you're going to be in. Mm-hmm. And it was just completely normal. Not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just this is it. And my mom found that so refreshing. Mm-hmm. It was that one moment where she was like, oh, we're going to be really, really good friends. Mm-hmm. It's so rare that you find that.
It is. It reminds me of a play date I went on this weekend. And I walked in the house and, you pull up and it's in a suburban neighborhood. So the house is completely unassuming, big 2-story brick house, just like every other one on the street. And so you go inside sort of half expecting what to find, right? Because they're all around here kind of built the same. And I walked in and it was that very thing. There was a full-size trampoline with a net cage in the dining room instead of a dining room. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. In the house.
Oh my God. These people are my heroes.
There's like dog toys everywhere. There's like eggs still left over on the countertop from where one of the young kids had made themselves eggs and just sort of left everything. And then the pat of butter that the dog decided to like grab off the counter and eat, and clothes and wax from some candle making. And I was just like, this is amazing. Like, this is life. This is life. This is how they live, right? They want their kids to be happy. They're playful, happy people themselves. So,
isn't that amazing how, like, when people enter that type of house, normally their reaction is overwhelmingly positive. And yet we also put pressure on ourselves to be the antithesis of that type of house.
Yes.
Especially during the holidays, where ostensibly the people who are coming over are in the family category, and family are supposed to be the people who have seen all of your bullshit and they know there's no pretense with family. Yeah. So it's like that should be the one group of people that you can have over and not have to clean for.
Well, and this has completely backfired on me because I have had friends over, and especially there's a group of moms that come over on a regular basis, and my house is always picked up. Number one, I do enjoy that. That's just my natural nature.
Right.
But also now I don't get invited to their houses, and they've said this out loud, because my house is a mess and I'd be embarrassed for you to see it after looking at your house. Right? I'm like, real shit.
Man. That backfired.
Stuff back on the floor, and like there's just this assumption that I have my shit together just because I decided to vacuum up. Yeah. The which goes back to the saying, like, that your outer world reflects your inner world. Right. But I just want to be like, well, don't open the drawers then, and don't look in the closets, and because that's the inner world.
Everything
all the
that
shit
can
that
open
I hide
holds
from
all of
everybody.
That's you're basically just the adult version of hiding all the mess under your bed.
Exactly.
When your parents tell you to clean the room.
Yeah.
How funny! But then I know people who just value cleanliness, and they just want to clean house because they want to clean house. I feel like you'd be in that category too. Like I would be. Well, so now I'm inserting my own stuff, but it resonates with me for you to say you have a clean house because you like a clean house. A whole lot more than you have a clean house because people are coming over.
That's really it. I have a clean house because I like a clean house.
Because you like having a clean house. That's a good reason to have a clean house.
Yeah. I get really anxious. Like, that is the one thing I did notice about that play date. Like, there was stuff on every surface, things piled up, and I start getting this like overwhelming sense. And so it does bother me a little bit to have all that stuff. And typically when that's happening in my world, there's some major stuff going on. Right. So that is sort of that indication to me, like, there's something going on internally that these people are not addressing.
Because when your house is in disarray, it's because there's something going on internally that you're not addressing. Whereas, and then for some people, the more disarray their life is in, the cleaner their house is going to be in, because they stress clean and they feel the need to like overcompensate with appearances.
Yeah, exactly.
You really can't judge a house by its cover.
No, you cannot.
I feel like my house is always in kind of a state of in-between. Like, we have a toddler, and I'm not going to follow him around picking up all of his stuff, and I'm not going to strong-arm him into trying to clean up all of his messes, and sometimes it's easier to leave something out because he's just going to come back to it in a little while, So, like, there's always a cup on some surface. There's always something that's about to get washed that has pee on it. There's always a thing that, like, is a hallmark of not clean in our house, but at the same time, throughout the week, I am I have it all mapped out. Like, this is the day I do the floors. This is the day I clean
Right.
the bathrooms, and on the weekends, and so like there is a cleanliness maintenance routine to keep it from falling into complete disarray, but it's never, ever, ever, ever spotless.
Yeah. I think there has to be a balance, right?
Yeah.
Because, you're missing out on life's moments if you're constantly chasing your toddler around and expecting them to clean things up. And then what are we teaching them, right? If
Right.
we're expecting perfection. So,
Well, we're teaching them that when company comes over, they have to clean their house spick and span and hide all the mess in their kitchen drawers. When I was little, before I had kids, I heard this parent lecture and be all like, don't clean your kids' rooms. You're teaching them that they can just make a mess without any consequence, and you should make them clean their rooms. And then I met parents, like when my peers started becoming parents and they had toddlers, and there's this whole like, I could make them clean their room if I wanted to spend 4 hours in there with a, crying fit every 30 minutes, or I could just do it and get it done, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I think, well, there's a valid point both ways. And so then going back to balance, it's a similar thing where we get him to clean his room. We also clean his room with him. We also clean his room in front of him, because modeling. And we also clean his room when he's not there. Like, all 4 of those things happen. And we don't say one is better than the other, or I shouldn't do this, I should do this instead. Like, I think there are times when there's a good vibe going on and he's in a good mood to like mimic us, and we just start cleaning and he just starts cleaning. Or if it's like a real huge disaster that was made in like 5 minutes, then we're like, okay, well, you're gonna do this. You're gonna clean this up. But he's already at a point where like if he spills a drink, he knows where the towels are, and he just goes and gets a towel and he cleans it up. And I've seen him play with his Legos. He wants to play with his trucks. He puts his Legos away, and then he goes and plays with his trucks. And so I don't know that there's like, but then sometimes he just makes a huge fucking mess and leaves it there,
Yes.
And like, it's just one of the things I'm learning is back to what you're saying. It just comes back to balance. You can't really veer too far on either side of the spectrum, or expect them to like hang out on one side of the spectrum or the other. And just kind of like understanding that it's a pendulum, and it'll always return back to center, and it'll always go back off, and it'll always return. It kind of like, you can be mindful and pay attention and be intentional about maintaining that balance, while then that then creates space for you to have capacity for the pendulum swing when it moves away from that sweet spot that you prefer.
Here's something else to it too. If you go into someone's house and you're immediately judging the way it looks, that's just something about you that you don't like, right? If you are judging someone else's house, you are sitting in their business. Same as if you're worried about, like if I really worried about what people think about my house when they come over, I am full on sitting in their business. But this is a perfect segue into something that's been bothering me.
Uh-oh, whose business have you been sitting in, Abby?
We've been talking about like, not having your shit together. So there is this person whom I do not know. Never met her. She's never been on my radar, but she posted something on Facebook and it landed in my coaching group page. Because the other fellow coach that posted this third person's Facebook post, got really upset about it. And so I wanted to kind of dissect it here, simply because it sort of talks about what we've been talking about, about sitting in other people's business.
And appearances and having your shit together.
And having your shit together. Exactly. So I'm not going to give you this person's name because it's not really worth the time to look her up, but I am going to read to you.
What if she was listening to this? God.
Great. Let's not give her any more notoriety.
I mean, but like, if we're about to cover some of her content, there's like the attribution factor, right?
Oh, damn it. Okay, fine. We'll put it in the show notes. I'm still not going to say her name. If you really want to know, then you can go look it up. You have to do the work to look it up.
I'm going to put a link to the actual post on Facebook that we're about to dive into, because I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So I don't know what she does.
Right.
I literally know nothing about her. Okay, so she makes this little like several page meme fancy presentation thing, and the title of it is Fire Your Life Coach and Hire a Therapist. Here's why with compare and contrast. So then you go to the next page and, oh geez, I can't read this all. It says, over the years, life coaching and therapy have become blurred. There are now people waking up with wild hairs up their butts and deciding that their job is telling other people how to live their lives. This isn't always the case, but so many life coaches have exactly 0 qualifications. So it kind of keeps on going. Are there great life coaches who can change your life? Yes. Not to mention business coaches, blah, blah, blah. I got to get to the page where... Oh, here. This is a good one. Life coaching often smears watery paint on a crumbling foundation. Therapy rebuilds the weak spots so you're rock solid in every situation. Anyway, she just kind of goes on and basically saying that life coaches don't have their shit together. Why would you want to be with somebody that doesn't have their shit together? Basically, life coaches tell you what to do. A therapist doesn't. It's very damaging to your brain to have a life coach. So anyway, it's kind of a bit of a smear campaign for life coaches. Can you see why I have a problem with this?
Yes, because in case anybody doesn't know this, Abby is a life coach.
Yes, I am. So the fellow coach, the colleague coach, posted this just totally enraged at this woman's post. And I, in all honesty, just couldn't help but laugh. Like at first I started getting the sweats, like, oh God, this is triggering me, right? And I found myself getting defensive. And then thinking about if you get defensive.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah. Just quickly walked through it. Like, whoa, okay, we're getting defensive about this. Like, what is the problem, right? And anyway, I don't know really what I want to say about this, other than this is the perfect example, and this is how it unfolded within the forum platform. Is that if you're triggered, you're very much sitting in this woman's business. Clearly, she had a horrible experience with a life coach in some way that probably damaged her or hurt her. And so this is just her way of kind of like expressing that to the world. But like, if I get all caught up in it, I'm going to spend a lot of time discrediting my own work and everything that I do.
If you buy into what she's saying.
Yes, absolutely.
I read through this whole thing, and I'm trying to look around my little lens camera thing. So she really goes into saying, here's a life coach, here's a therapist, and here's the difference.
Yeah.
Right? Talks about the costs. She thinks about, she's just.
It is and compare and contrast with a bunch of opinion. And
I'm looking for, right now, while you're talking, I'm looking for there are a couple logical fallacies that I notice a lot in things like this, and I don't remember the name of it. Like it feels like a false equivocation where she's pitting two things against each other that are not necessarily against each other. Like, what if somebody is a therapist and a life coach? What would that person say about this? Or like, where they're both? Is there room for them to coexist and kind of like fill in each other's gaps instead of being pitted against each other? But then I can't find the name of it, but it's this logical fallacy where you take the stereotype or what it looks like from on the outside looking in, kind of like a generalization of a thing, and then you apply that to everyone in that camp. And so what this reminds me of is when I used to do CrossFit. People who did CrossFit loved CrossFit and talked about CrossFit and tried to get people to do CrossFit. And people who didn't do CrossFit would talk about people who do CrossFit like it's a cult or like it's an MLM thing or like it, you know. And as someone who was in the CrossFit crowd, I was triggered by the people who would just dismiss the whole CrossFit thing. And I would, and there's some legitimacies to it. There's some real ways that CrossFit can be really beneficial to a lot of people in a certain place with a certain set of goals. But the outside looking in critique of CrossFit was based in things that were also true. You don't have there's not a lot of stuff you have to do to become certified to become a CrossFit coach or start your own CrossFit business compared to other physical training type of things. And there are a lot of people who would get into it for the wrong reasons and then hurt themselves because their instructors weren't properly trained and they pushed them too hard. And then, so like you have very real cases that if you only look at those, CrossFit looks like just the biggest fad and biggest mistake anybody in the fitness community could make. But then if you look at other things like where it came from and why it exists and what the actual founder of CrossFit says and the whole point of it and what it's here to solve, you can make a case for it, right? So whether you're in or out, you have this idea of what it is, and then you apply that to everybody in the CrossFit world. And you completely throw nuance out the window. And I feel like that's what she's doing with life coach and with therapy. Probably more with life coaching. Like her language is very anti-life coach. And I wouldn't even go so far as to say that maybe she had a problem with a life coach, as she just heard a description of it and had zero experience of her own and said, oh, well, then this is the box that I can put this in to make it fit my understanding of the world. You know?
Yeah, it's her reference point.
Right. And so what I'm seeing is that she's taking some things about some life coaches, maybe most life coaches. I don't really know. I haven't looked at the data, but I'm sure there's a subset of life coaches that the way she describes it perfectly applies to. People who are untrained, who have gone through some bullshit certification that doesn't mean anything and are charging way too much money to give bad advice. I'm sure that's in the life coach world. I know that's also in the therapy world.
Exactly. Right.
And I know that there are life coaches who aren't that way. And so for her to draw this polar dichotomous relationship between the two and then pit them against each other is fundamentally flawed logic upon which to build any conclusion whatsoever. And then she builds a conclusion, which really is on the first page. All she's trying to say is don't do life coaching, do therapy. I mean, sure, that's your opinion. It's fine. You're entitled to it. But then what is she? Is she a therapist? Is she licensed? Is she, like, I don't know. It just, I wasn't triggered by this because I'm not a life coach, but I was annoyed. I was annoyed because this type of thinking is so rampant. And if you don't scrutinize it, it's very easy to just go along with.
That is the exact point why I even wanted to bring this up in the first place. Number one, it's a relevant topic for me. Yes, I was immediately triggered because it is a broad generalization of both groups, both therapists and life coaches. But I do feel like that is what's going on in our world right now. It is very divisive. We are pitting one another against each other. You're either with us or you're with them. And there's no middle ground. And this bothers me because it's really hard to live in a true north world and live as your true self if you are constantly using your reference points to shame other people into your camp. And so, number one, I look at that and the first thing I think of is, okay, I'm triggered. Yes, she's right. There is very little certification process for life coaches. And it's one thing that completely bothers me because I am a highly ethical coach and I do not believe in offering anything that I have not been trained in. But that's not monitored. And I'm not, that's just me. There's some in my camp and there's some on the other side. There's other things that trigger me, like, yes, the amount of money that it costs. We are not covered by insurance. I probably give more free sessions away than I do actually paid sessions. There's just the list is long. So if I immediately go into that, then that's what I sit with, and I now just pit her against me. She's now on the other side. She is now one of them. And that is not living in my true north. Right? If I am really all about living in love and light, then I need to embrace this woman and her perspective and realize that, okay, she's just had a hysterectomy and just know that there's probably something below the surface. There is a reason that this came up for her. And I'm not going to know that unless I go out and talk to her. So it does me no good to actually just sit in her business and make it my own. without asking any questions.
Well, maybe we could talk to her. It looks like she has her own podcast.
Well,
How
then
fun
we
would that
could.
be?
That
So-
would be very interesting.
So you go to the post and you can look at her and you can look at her Instagram and you can look at her website, and what it looks like to me is like on her, she's a founder of a company called I Love You the Monsters, and the one big highlighted call to action on the top of the menu of the website is find a therapist. And so what this immediately tells me is it might just be marketing. That whole post may have just been her part of a content strategy to find topics that people relate to and then find a way to create some content that points them to that call to action to go get a therapist.
But
And
here's
it
the
sounds like
crazy
maybe
thing.
she's capitalizing on polarization, which is a shit move.
Yeah. Right.
But
Because it
it may
spreads
not be-
a wildfire.
Right. And so I think maybe I'm trying to find an excuse to have some grace for her, but it may not be something where she's going on the attack against life coaches. It's not like an aggressive move to bring down an industry so much as it could have been backed by keyword research. You know, and then you find people who are searching for life coach. Maybe you think therapy is a better option, so you're going to write some content to take those people, scoop them into your boat, and then you know, I mean, I come from a marketing world, and it's really easy to come up with very data-driven, emotionally detached reasons to write an article saying fire your life coach, hire a therapist. When you make money off of people hiring a therapist, especially through your website.
Right. And I completely understand everything you're saying, and I am in a place of grace and love and light with her. It doesn't bother me. Her post no longer bothers me. But it is the example that I want to share, because I do want to tell everybody, like, to do your research on any topic, to stay in that love and light, and figure out what that means for you, to try to find that balance, find that middle ground where you have your side, but there's nobody else against you. They just have a different perspective.
Right. Even if it's posed, like you read this thing, and it really does sound like she just has a grudge against the life coaching world, like getting a wild hair up their butt and just like even the words that she uses. Like I get it, it's snappy and it's got teeth and it's edgy, but it also it may be doing some harm to people, or doing, causing some hurt, like it did for you. And honestly, like if she is coming from that angle and she wants to just write a thing about life coaches, then it could have been an article about how they each have their own place and what's a world that's bigger than therapy or life coaching.
But this is what I find, because let's take it from the approach that it's just a marketing strategy, right? Just to piss some people off and to not piss some other people off that are in camp therapy, and to get more clients. Like, don't you think that there's something wrong with that?
Oh yeah, I think weaponizing polarization is just such a backwards move. It just takes people back.
That's what I feel like. It
It's
just
cultivating
divides
this
us.
tribalism. Yeah, and that's what's more angering about this than anything else.
Right.
That
Right.
it feels like. I mean, going back to our last interview, polarization is the inability to see yourself in another. And if I go deep enough inside of you, I'm going to find me. And if I go deep enough inside me, I'm going to find you. And so if you look into this person and find everything you can about her that's available on the internet, you're going to find yourself. And then at some point, you're going to be somebody who took a course of action motivated by wanting to help people. And you're looking at somebody else who took a course of action motivated by wanting to help people. And maybe you took different courses of action, but standing around talking about who took a better one or a worse one is not a good use of anyone's time, which is what she's doing with this article. And just, it's so easy to fuel the fires of polarization. And it is so difficult to, what's the opposite of that? To squelch them? Is squelch the right word? I don't think I like the word squelch. That sounds sticky. To put them out. It's a whole lot harder to put them out. To smudge them. Yeah. I'm going to stick with squelch. I don't even know if I'm using that word right, but it sounds fun in my...
I use that word in that way. But
Squelch.
you're a homeschooler, so
I do have really good words.
Here's the other part of it too. She talks about life coaches not having their shit together, and therapists do, and why would you want to work with somebody that doesn't have their shit together? And I want to say to everybody listening, like, I don't want you to have your shit together. Because if you have your shit together and you walk around thinking you have your shit together, there's something really wrong with that, right? Because we're constantly in a state of suffering. There's always something that is triggering us. And that implies that you're not working on anything. And it's very unapproachable. It's very much like when my girlfriends come over and they see this quote unquote perfectly put together house. And all of a sudden they can't compare. And
they have shame around their own house just by the fact that yours is put together.
Yeah. And then if you take the notes from our interview with Rob Bell last week, and he's talking about how those stories connect us, like, and you even mentioned it, like the very parts of the book that moved you, the very parts that were emotional for you were his very own stories. That's your shit. So if you have that all together and nothing happens to you, then you're unapproachable, unattainable, right?
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that we interviewed a guy who has done some stuff. He's made some definite marks in this generation and in this culture. And his most recent book is a book about all the shit he didn't have together.
Yeah, right.
You know? And so,
Yes.
like, yeah, she's saying in this thing, many of them don't have their shit figured out, like, at all. But I've talked to therapists, including my own therapist, and some. But it's harder with my own therapist because it's supposed to be about me. But like, they don't have their shit together either. No human has their shit together, really. That's kind of what it is. What it means to be human is to be figuring out the shit. And there's way more shit than you can figure out in a lifetime, because you do figure out some shit. I mean, I use this example a lot, but it's just like parenting. The second you get used to figuring out what it's like to parent a 2-year-old, you have a 3-year-old.
Yes, right.
Like,
and you start all over.
Unless you crystallize your life and turn it into something static, you will never have all of your shit figured out.
That would be so boring. That would be
well, that's not life. That's not life. That's the difference between a living organism and a corpse. The only difference is that the living organism has change happening.
You're saying that a soul is here to change and not have their shit together.
I think
and a soul is something living.
Part of being a human, one of the most quintessential elements of what it means to be a human being is to not have your shit together.
Yes. Yes. But working on it.
Yes. And
having
so you can
the awareness,
because
you can not have your shit together and be totally oblivious.
Yeah, to be aware that your shit isn't together and to be working on trying to get it together.
Yeah,
and then the irony there, the weird catch-22 here is that when you do that, you do get some shit together. Like some of the shit gets together, but then in the process, there's like another layer of untapped shit that you also then need to dig into. You know, like there's always go back to balance.
Yes.
Like, you can't just be floating around saying, oh, it's never going to happen. It's like, oh, dishes are never done because there are always more dishes, so I'm just going to stop doing dishes. Well, that has some serious consequences.
Yes.
And then if you're always, like, hand cleaning every single thing to keep it spick and span and you never even have to use your dishwasher, well, then that also has some really other weird consequences. Like, you can't... there's an element of, like, there are dishes in the sink, so you do the dishes, and then you live your life. And then when living life puts more dishes in the sink, then you do the dishes. So, like, that's what getting your shit together is. It's not something... It's never past tense. It's always present tense. I am getting my shit together, which means that there is shit that has been gotten together, and there's also shit that hasn't been gotten together.
Well, and I think the process is constantly evolving too. Like if we just look at this example and we plug it into different time periods in my life, had I read this in my 20s, I would have exploded. I would have sat and stewed in this for days, and have just been so angered by it and felt like she was being defamatory.
I like deflammatory too, because it adds like flaming, like there's a fire element to it. Deflammatory.
Squelching them.
Squelching.
Yeah.
Actually, apparently squelch means to make a soft sucking sound such as that is made by walking heavily through mud. How many times can you say soft sucking sound?
Okay, stop.
5 times fast.
No. So it's evolving. Like, okay, right. So then, but now I'm at a place where, like through my own work, through my own growth, through my own getting my shit together, I am immediately triggered. I realize I'm being reactive. I dig into it. I do the work. I figure out why. Know that it has absolutely nothing to do with her or why she's even posting that. And now it's shifted. Like now my shit is getting it together would be more about changing that dynamic, like that complete dichotomy of you're either with us or with them. Like that's, so whether it's, it's just, I just feel like it's always evolving. It's always completely changing, that even once you grow and you've quote unquote mastered something, it just sort of develops into something else that's going to serve you for your next lesson.
Oh, absolutely.
That you need to learn. So.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's, and the funny thing is that when you talk about the way that you coach yourself and the way that you coach other people, one of the pages in this post says, typically life coaching centers on external goals and achievements that happen in the future. Coaches are so great for this. This is the stellar form of hammering out the logistics of your morning routine or strategizing about the next steps for growing your business. Therapy, on the other hand, is all about the internal work from events that have happened in the past or are happening currently. It focuses on healing and restructuring your inside emotions, reactions, and thought patterns so that the outside success can come easier. The second thing is what you do. That's what you do to yourself. That's what you do to your clients. Yeah, like the way she describes therapy is what you are doing when you do life coaching.
Yes. To a certain degree. Because I will say that if you need to go back and deal with past traumas, that is not my department. I simply want to bring awareness to your past traumas, to figure out how you're showing up in your life right now and show you how that's getting in your way.
Right. You're inviting people to do the work.
Yes.
And I feel like the differentiation would be the therapist would kind of like come alongside you and kind of like very much hands-on, not do the work with you, but they're more involved in doing that. I think it's just two different doors into the same house, because there's some people who just aren't in a place where they're going to be receptive or willing to work with what therapy offers. But life coaching is something that they can do. And sometimes it's the other way around, where you do all the internal work, but all that does is just drudge up a bunch of shit you don't have any framework for understanding how to do anything with, and so then a life coach can come in and give you structure around. Like,
exactly.
Like they're
And I've had to send people back. I'm like, okay, as any life coach should, that when you come up to realizing that your client needs more than what you can give, I've sent people back to therapy and said, okay, go there first and then come see me, for that very reason that you're talking about. Like, go deal with those traumas and then come back to me and I'll show you how to actually use them to work for you. Right. Yeah.
So maybe the takeaway here is just to learn to recognize polarizing language.
Yes.
Polarizing thought processes, thought processes. Learn how to recognize polarizing logic, because she's using a lot of logical fallacies, but a lot of logic nonetheless. And just learn to recognize that.
Well, and that's all about sitting in your business, which was very much my point in the first place. But I also want it to just be this blanket statement. Like, I'm using that as one example, but there are so many topics right now, between the COVID mess that's going on, between the election results, where it's very polarizing. And so, I just want this to just be my platform today. To stay in your business. And yes, recognize that that's what it is and that's what's going on. And then can you stay in your place and recognize that there could be two differences in opinion between you and somebody else, but it doesn't have to divide you.
Well, like, to take it a step further, there are some things that I'm very polarized on, and I feel rightfully so. Like racism. I am in the polar end that says it shouldn't exist. And then I find myself butting up against people who, through their difference of opinion, feel the need to defend their desires to continue to be actively racist or homophobic or misogynist, right? And so in that situation, my opinion is in a very polar opposite place than their opinion. And we will never, ever come eye to eye on our opinions about these things. Right. I don't expect to change their mind any more than I expect for them to change mine. And I do not expect people to change my mind on my opinion that we should abolish racism. And so when I find myself unmoving on that opinion, and I find somebody else unmoving on an opinion that I am diametrically opposed to, I can find myself in a very polarized place. But I think one of the things that we need to name here is that the antidote to that tension and the fight, because then the only option you feel like you have is to fight them or ignore them, right? I can either strong arm you into just shutting the fuck up, or I can just be in my own business and ignore you. But if you're out there being a racist, then me ignoring you doesn't help the people who are going to fall prey to the hands of their racism. Right?
Are those really the only two options?
Well, no, those aren't. Those are the first that present themselves because I'm not going to move and they're not going to move. Right? But then the third option is to, like we said in the last episode and like we're saying this one, is find a way to connect with something on a human level with them. You're not going to connect in an opinion level. You're not going to connect on a values level. You're not going to connect on an ideals level. And you're probably not going to connect on a shared experiences level. Because all those things contribute to these surface things that are mutually exclusive and diametrically opposed. But you have to go beneath all that. You have to go beneath all that to just the human. Not the experience, not the story, not the social conditioning, just the human. And find some piece of you in them and some piece of them in you. Because what that's going to do is it's not motivated by changing their opinion to match yours or changing yours to match theirs or coming up with some shitty middle ground that doesn't serve either. Like, it's not about that. That's not the motivation. The motivation is connection. And if I can connect to you as a human being, then maybe we can figure out a way to resolve this tension up here by coming together down here.
Do you think that if somebody who is incredibly racist and very forward with that your interaction with them, that you can truly see them as a human? Or do you feel that you would be so triggered that you would not be able to see them as a human?
I think just like your relationship with this Facebook post, I would initially be triggered. And I'd have to work internally on that triggering first. And I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with a friend, and this happens to be a person that is very triggering for me and who I don't have any respect for. And as we continue to dig into it, I began to realize that, I mean, I've said this about other people in the past as well. The things about them that triggered me are the things about myself that I haven't really befriended yet. And then almost like a switch flipping, it went from contempt to compassion. Because I have done some work on Rayron. I still have more work to do on Rayron, clearly. But all of a sudden it went to, okay, this person is acting this way, which is harmful for people. This person's acting this way, which makes nobody want to be around them. This person's acting this way, which leads to XYZ. And we focus on those actions. All we're going to do is call them out and say, you should be better. But this person wasn't given any tools on how to be better. Wasn't given any reason to be secure in themselves or who they would be if they were to make a change. Like, we're asking them to do things they're not equipped for. And so then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I remember being in that spot. I remember being a person who was exactly who this person is, without all the tools, with all the insecurity, with all the fear. And what was I afraid of? Well, I see that fear in this person. And what did I really, really, really want? What I wanted a connection. I wanted somebody to look at me and say, in spite of all your bullshit, you're still worthy of something. And you don't have to do anything to earn it. And this person doesn't have that in their life because people can't get past the actions and behaviors that are hurting people.
Right. And
so then I thought, man, this person doesn't need accountability. This person doesn't need a slap on the wrist every time they fall out of line. This person doesn't need, to be reprimanded for being an immature dickhead most of the time. This person needs a real friend. And then, of course, it started to work out like a math problem. You give this person that real friend self. You give that person a safe place to be what they really are, to figure out what they really are.
To meet them where they are.
Yes, and then to detach themselves from all the things that they've become because of what they thought other people wanted them to be. And detach their emotional cords from those people. And to have the strength and the courage to say, no, I'm not going to do this, even though my whole life I've been trying to do it to get your approval. And you don't do that unless you have a safe place to practice, because it's like riding a bike. You're going to fucking fail. And you need someone to be there and say, okay, that's okay that you fell. Try again. And so this person needs a mentor. This person needs a friend, like a real mentor. And I know the friends this person has. It's not there. And then if that person had those things, then all of a sudden, all this behavior that goes from just obnoxious to really hurtful might just dissolve. There may not be any reason or place for it anymore. And a healthy version of this person is someone that I think everybody in their life would benefit from.
But what if that person chooses not to change regardless of having that type of friendship?
That's the tricky part. That very question would be me being in his business.
Yes.
All I get to choose is, am I going to be a friend of this person? Am I going to be a friend of this person that they need, or not? Mm-hmm. But see what happened there? Like, I have very strong opinions about how this person presents externally, and I'm very opposed to those. And they trigger me, and I get angry, and I want to get retaliatory. Mm-hmm. But yet, finding myself within that person makes the best answer for me. Just be a really good friend. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you got to be healthy about it. You got to have boundaries. You have to have certain parameters in which, if it starts to get, move into unhealth, or you start getting taken advantage of or whatever, then you can bow out and say, well, I tried, and I think people lose themselves in that. People say, oh, this person just needs somebody to take care of them and be a friend and be encouraging and be supporting, and then they pour all themselves into that person, and then that person becomes their project and they try to fix them, and you can't be motivated by that either. But I guess I'm really going down a rabbit trail, but I guess really, like, this was just a real life example of me being very, 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 very polar opposite somebody, very, very triggered by somebody, very, very not a fan of the camp they're in. Mm-hmm. And for me, the only right answer seems to be a very real human connection that lies at the base, like at the fundament, behind and beneath all the other shit that I don't like.
Mm-hmm. And I want to point out too, though, that you're not excusing that person's behavior, because even when you go back to the example of racism, like if you can meet somebody on a human level that is a racist, you're not excusing that they are a racist because you've made a connection with them, right?
Right.
If they do, there are consequences for every action, but what those consequences are not your business, other than you can choose to participate and engage in life with that person or not. But I don't know. I want to go back to something you said a bit ago. I want to tell you a story. So I grew up in very rural Nebraska. I've said that before, you know that. Like, it's all white people, all white people. That's now changed quite a bit. As we've gotten like migrant workers coming through in the beef packing plants and whatnot. But when I grew up, it was just white farmers. And I remember the only person of color, any color, that I ever saw was on TV. I had no reference other than what my grandparents told me, what my parents told me, and then how it was displayed to me on TV. And I remember in high school, an African-American family moved a block away from our house. They just moved down the street. And I was told that I had to walk a different way to school. I could no longer, their house was kind of on my route to school, and I had to alter my route and no longer walk by that school or that house. And I didn't question it. I just thought, oh, okay, they must be bad people. Or I became scared of them. Like, okay, there's something really wrong. I'm in high school, right? I'm a teenager. And this is, I remember very clearly, like, that's my mindset. Like, oh, they must have done something wrong, because it was my only reference point. So then well, let me just back up and say, if we take a look at my values at that time, I strongly valued family. I strongly valued respecting my elders. So if that's what I'm told, and if that's what I'm learned, and I value my family and I value respecting my elders, does that make me wrong?
Right.
When I at that time believed at the time that to be true, right? And so then I go to college, and we lived in like these little suites in the dorm, like with common areas. And the girl that kind of lived on the other side of the suite from me was this African-American girl, Kanoa Green, out of New York City. And she was freaking amazing. She was amazing. And she totally like took all my preconceived notions about people of color and just threw them out the window, and practically, like, to the point of slapping me on the face, like, do you not think I'm normal? You know? And just changed everything. And that's when I opened my eyes and realized, like, holy crap, the conditioning, you know. And had I not been open to that, because that's just, I feel like, the person that I am, like, I'm open to learning somebody else's perspective. Teach me, enlighten me. I'm not so stuck in my ways that I can't be educated. And so that's what she did for me. But had I stayed there, I could have very easily gone down this path of being completely and outwardly racist. And so I share that story with you to tell you, like, our values could be the same. Like, you may also value family. You may also value respecting your elders. But the language and what, you know, that we're being taught can be completely different. And that's where the polarization happens. And so I'm pointing that out. Like, when you're talking about making a connection, yes, look at their values. It may be a warped version of what it is for you, but it's the same value. It's just dissected differently.
Right. I mean, if you, I think I mentioned this on the podcast, but I'm a big fan of the Marvel movies, and the main big villain in the last several movies is he was trying to wipe out half of the population of every living creature in the universe, but his reason why is because there's just a scarcity of resources and people are abusing it. And so you have a person who has a really awful solution to a real valid problem, and at the end of the day, like, he wants to help. He just has a very twisted, just like morally maligned solution, you know, that's really inhumane. And so you talk about his solution and you think, oh, that's a really bad guy. But you look at his motivation and you think, oh, I know some really good people who are motivated to solve the same problem. And that's what makes him a great villain. You know, because he starts from a place of an argument that you can get behind. And then it just goes awry the more you stack actionable layers on top of it. And one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the polarizing topics in the news today are very surface level stuff. Like the mask, no mask, right?
Yep.
And people in both those camps create all kinds of narratives about the other camp.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, both of those surface level opinions are stacked on some more sub-level values, belief systems, conditionings, fears, whatever. And the deeper you go, the more you find people in the camps bleed together. You know? And so I have a story similar to yours. I at the ad agency where I was a creative director, one of my best friends there, we still keep up today, I told her one time that she was the 5th lesbian I ever worked with. And she goes, that's a really weird thing to keep track of. And I thought, oh, but for me, each of those has been a huge leap. I worked at a sandwich shop, and my manager was a lesbian, and she was like, what people who have never met it. I can't even say that because I had never really, my gaydar was so off. Like, she had all the traditional stereotype markers. She was like butcher than the guys that worked there, right?
Yeah.
And I remember looking her in the face, and she was talking about gay people, and I was like, well, I never met any, so I'll tell you when I didn't even know what to look for. I thought she was just like a manly lady, and spiky hair, tribal tattoo, combat boots, cargo shorts, pocket knife, like she had all of the things. But I was looking her in the face, totally blind, because I was like, I don't know. And then later someone pulled me aside and they were like, you know, she's a lesbian, right? And then in my very like conservative, fundamentalist Christian Baptist world, I started like walking on eggshells around her because anything I had to say about LGBTQ folks was negative. And so I just didn't say anything about anything at all ever when she was there. But I was so ignorant to the whole thing. And then I worked with another, my next job, I don't know if it was my next job. It's kind of, I don't remember the order, but I remember sitting side by side with another lesbian at this desk job where it was just the two of us in an office alone together. And we both had crushes on all the same celebrities. And so we would relate over that. And it was just like talking to one of the dudes. And then I worked with it, and then on and on it goes. And every single time I found myself working with a lesbian, that one seemed a whole lot more normal, a whole lot more like me, a whole lot more, why do I have these opinions about you just because of your preference? Right? And And so it's funny because my values didn't change for a long time. My quote unquote values, my opinions, my beliefs. Like I went through the phase where I was like, I can still love you as a human, but you need to change if you want, that whole thing. And at some point I began to question the source material because I could not abide discriminating against these people because I had seen enough of them. I had seen enough of myself in them.
You had new reference points.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when I find somebody who is bigoted against fill in the blank category of people, it's like you said with your upbringing, they just don't have exposure to very many of those people, period.
Right.
And so once they do, that bigotry melts away. It just does. I have experienced it. It just, all of a sudden, you just have to choose, am I going to see you as a human being? Or am I going to not?
Yes.
And whatever you choose, you have to live with the fact that you actively made that decision. At some point, you get to a point where you can no longer use it as an excuse that it was handed to you by somebody else. And at that point, no matter how bigoted somebody is, I always see them choose to see the human in the other person. They just have to get exposed. They just have to see more of the people that they're afraid of because bigotry is rooted in fear. And so you start with you don't go on the attack and say, you just shouldn't do that. They're not going to hear that. But the question, what are you afraid of? Almost always it's the unknown. So make it known.
Yeah.
That is the death of bigotry, exposure. But in order to actually invite someone into that and to give them that type of experience, you have to cut through all the surface level polarization, even if you stand on a completely opposite side from them. You don't have to give up your stance on the issue in order to connect with them as a human. That's what I'm really saying.
Yes, right.
Meeting in the middle doesn't mean meeting in the middle up here where the opinions are. It means meeting in the middle down here at the very base building blocks that all that stuff is stacked up on.
It's, well, and you talk about the mask, no mask debate. I'm in camp no mask, but I can tell you if I go to the other side, to the mask camp, we both want the same thing. We both value our health and wellness. And that's what you're saying. Get below the surface of mask or no mask, get to the value of we both value our health and wellness. So then how I want to end this really is talking about the creation of the new stuff that's going to come out of seeing somebody else on a human level. Because if I can connect with somebody on the other side of the fence on this mass debate and we can realize we have the same value, you don't have to agree with it, but we're coming from the same intention. We have the same intention. Then what can we do to make it better for both of us? Where can you go from here to make sure you feel safe and healthy and to make sure that I feel safe and healthy? And for you, even just, I was afraid to tell you I was gay because I knew that about you at one point in your life that this was going to be a problem for you. And had you not gone through that evolution of growth and just being, like you said, educated on LGBTQ people, we would not be sitting here creating this beautiful podcast right now. If you just would have stayed where you were and stayed in your opinions and your beliefs and chosen not to have a growth mindset, and chosen to kind of stay in your business, then this would not have been created. And then, we've gotten so much feedback lately between just people reaching out to us, between the reviews. We've had Rob fucking Bell on our podcast. We're making ripples. And so it's not just about us anymore. And so this thing that we've created is now affecting other people, all because we were able to move our reference points just a little bit. We were able to see beyond our conditioning, stay in our own business, find out why we're being triggered, and find that balance, whether we agree or not, but meet each other on a human level and connect. And so there we go, right at our hour. That's that's what I wanted to leave you with. Look at what it will create.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really, and well, if both sides play ball.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
it
true.
also needs to be named that, going back to my example of my friend that triggers me, if I went the let's be his best friend route, he may still just shit on that. And at some point you got to have the boundary to say, okay, this isn't going to happen. And maybe you talk to somebody who's in a different place with you, in a different place than you opinion wise. And maybe you do dig deep enough to see yourself in them and create a connection point and try to kind of see the human in each other and say, here's my human, where's your human? They still may just not. And that's also okay. And it's not your job or responsibility to force that to happen just because of how beautiful it might be. You did your part.
Yes.
And if it doesn't go anywhere, if it goes toxic, then
that's all
it's
you
totally
can control.
pull out.
Well, that's the consequences piece I was talking about, because if he chooses not to engage in that, his consequence is disconnect. His consequence is being unhappy, because we are wired to connect. And if he doesn't have anybody in his life that can connect with him and be honest and be real and meet him where he is, then that is an unfortunate consequence, whether he sees it or not. Same thing with anybody else. You know, if someone on the other side of the mass debate, can't come to the middle and have a conversation about some things we can do, the consequence is we are one less step ahead than where, you know, I would like us to be, right? Because we can't. So it's like, that's the thing. You're right. You cannot encourage the other side. They have to walk up to the trough and be, you know, want to drink the water. You can lead them there, but you can't make them drink.
Right.
And that's not your business to do so. And that consequence, whatever it is, will be on them, you know?
Right. And then their consequence is not your fault either, just because you didn't try harder when things got toxic. And like my job is to tell myself this person wasn't equipped by their parents to have the tools to actually get past this. But his job is to realize that he's in his 30s and can go fucking get the tools. Like, that's not an excuse for him. For me, that's an excuse to give him compassion. But for him, that's not an excuse to keep operating this way.
Right. But you've heard me talk about young souls and old souls. We're all here to learn lessons. And if you're a young soul, to me, if you're not getting it, like if your friend just doesn't get it, doesn't get on board, never comes around, that is a very clear indication to me that he is a young soul. He is not ready to learn that yet. And it's almost like it's got to be that behavior has to be repeated several times, and that may mean several lifetimes before he actually gets it. And that isn't your fault. That's literally his soul's journey to figure out when that timing is for him to say, yes, I'm ready to connect. And if not, and you've done your business and you've been willing and you've met them where they are, then you don't have to stick around.
You don't
They're
owe them
not
anything
ready.
else.
Yeah.
And if they don't get their shit together, it's not on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay. I was sitting there like, we talked to Rob Bell, and now we're talking about house cleaning.
Yeah, but we got to start somewhere.
No, this one's somewhere good. I was like, we finally, remember when we started, we were like, we're going to run out of stuff to talk about. I was like, oh, this is what that feels like.
This is it. Here we are. We run out of things to say.
Oh, man.
No, and this is a topic I actually want to dive deeper into. So
absolutely.
we'll
and I'm gonna get that girl on our podcast and we can talk about life coaching versus
This would
therapy.
be interesting. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, if you're down.
Yep.
All right, cool. Yeah. Well, fuck. What are you grateful for?
My babysitter. I actually am grateful to her. Here's why. She picked up listening to our podcast over the summer. I take that back. Not over the summer, over this past school year. She's in PT school, physical therapy school, and started listening to it and got really engaged. And she's just one of those people that has that growth mindset. And she's on break right now, winter break, and it's been fun. We've been going for walks and just engaging in growth conversations.
That's cool.
And so she's just sort of the poster child right now, just for people. Like, I'm just grateful for people who are willing to open their eyes, just to see a different perspective, to be willing to grow, to
totally
push past the boundaries, which is what Rob showed for me last week, is that the box of religion didn't work for me, but I kept growing. And so I'm just grateful for all of those people. And she just happens to be one I'm currently working with that's willing to do that.
You should ask her opinion on the difference between physical therapy and physical life coaching.
Yeah. Well, that's an easy short answer, because we've kind of had that conversation.
Really? I was joking. Physical life coaching is a thing?
Well, that's what I want to do. That's why I want to take you and go running or biking or swimming, because there's something neurologically that happens physiologically.
When you move. Physical life coaching. Who knew?
But she talked about moving. Anyway, okay, right. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful that I fucking cleaned my office.
Okay.
Here's why. There was a mess in a corner.
Yes.
And it was just a whole bunch of, like all the mess had cut and collected. Anytime there was something that looked like mess, I would put it in the mess corner, right?
Yeah.
And then I looked at it one day, and it was too much mess. It's like when you go as long as you can without taking out the trash, and it piles up, and eventually you just have to take out all the trash.
Yes.
I mean, definitely when I was in college, totally not something that I do now and isn't happening right now. But I thought, I need to address this. And so I took all the trash, and I just made a big pile on the floor in the middle of my office, thinking I'm going to have to step over this. It's going to be inconvenient. It's going to be ugly. I'm going to have to move it if I want to play keys or, like to force a later version of me to clean this up, make it so inconvenient for future me that he has to deal with this, right? Mm-hmm. And then I spent the rest of that time making a TikTok about how energy healing ideas can also translate into space cleaning ideas, and cleaning your space can have an energetic healing effect. 3 days go by and the mess hasn't moved, and future me doesn't give two shits about it and has learned how to step over the mess. And so then I start cleaning it and start, kind of like figuring out what goes where, but it just felt so daunting. And so then I sat there in the middle of the mess and made a part 2 TikTok about how all I was doing in the last one was spiritual bypassing, and I was using all this like energy talk to turn it into a life lesson to avoid actually having to do the work. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, look at me. And then I didn't clean the mess, and a couple days went by again. And so today I just fucking cleaned the mess. I just got the mess taken care of. And so then there's a part 3 TikTok coming out later today about how you can talk about doing the work or you can do the work. Mm-hmm. And so it's just been this weird, like, me responding to me saga of mapping energy healing onto room cleaning, because you're taking all the junk and you're bringing it to light and you're getting it to where you have to deal with it, and then you're choosing whether or not you want to deal with it, and then you got to deal with it, and then you clear it, and guess what happens? There's going to be more mess, and so when that happens, you clear it again too. And so like there is some...
You just described what goes on in people's minds.
What do you mean?
That when there's a mess and it's going on internally and it's overwhelming and you don't want to deal with it, but then when you deal with it, it like all of a sudden there's a shift and things lighten up and there's new opportunities, but then the shit can come back.
Right.
The mess can come back.
And then you can judge yourself for the fact that the shit came back, and that goes all the way back to expecting your shit being together to be a state of being and not a process. But anyway, I'm glad that I got the office clean, because I do like having a clean office. I like having nothing on the floor. I like being able to know where things are, and it's I'm still at a point in life, and I may never get out of this point in life, but it feels daunting to like maintain that, and it feels daunting to clean a thing, and that's just part of where I am on my journey. But I was able to actually create some content that's hopefully helpful. And in the meantime, for right now, the office is clean.
Very nice.
So I have a lot of gratitude for the fact that that is how that thing unfolded.
It's done.
And of course, I would turn cleaning my office into a 1 week, 3 video, teachable, learnable experience.
That's perfect.
All right. Well,
people need it.
Next time is our Christmas episode.
Yes, it is.
Are we doing anything special for that?
We might.
Who knows? A lot can happen in the next 7 days. Until then, thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye. We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/True North Podcast 11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do, I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops. And you can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are.
Mm-hmm. And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect. What
about the gratitude?
Oh, this one. Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.